All right, g'day, hi, and welcome. Okay, before anybody asks, what you're looking at here is a PRS SE Mark Holcomb Signature Series guitar and a very beautiful, I forgot to undo my snare, 2006 SG3. They were limited runs on the SG3, and I got to turn off my snare, or you're going to hear my snare the whole video. Imagine that I'm up that far back, and that's how sensitive a snare is. It picks me, it rattles from back there. Okay, so what you're looking at here is my two best recording guitars. I don't know what makes them so good for recording, but I just really love recording with these two guitars. Out of all the guitars I have, which is quite a few, and more coming, but yeah. But this video is going to be a bit of not necessarily a controversial video. The title is a bit hyperbolic, I get that, but there's a point to be made here. Why do Gibson pickups just sound better than everybody else's pickups? That kind of thing, right? Well, the thing is that something I've realized about Gibson, love them or hate them, is that they are really stuck in that dad rocker, grandpa rocker, if you really want to think about it. To some of you, might even be great grandpa, kind of sound. Like they haven't really moved on from the original formulas very far, right? And that's kind of what they're known for. So like Gibson doesn't really make a modern machine, but for example, the SG is very modern for its time, to the point where it could still compete with modern guitars. Like it's a really incredible platform for what they are. But why do they sound the way they sound? Well, they sound the way they sound mainly due to the pickups. Now, I know some people, pickups don't matter, they definitely do matter. But when you're comparing the same type of pickup to itself, you're just getting variations of, right? So there's not a big difference. So if you compare humbucker to humbucker, well, the way I would look at it is, okay, there's kind of two categories of humbuckers. Maybe there's more, but I will break them down into two categories. Single poled wiring and four wiring, right? So if you see the two coils here, okay, this humbucker's doing the same thing. It's got two coils underneath those plates, the same as this. It would look like this underneath there, basically. But the difference is that what they did is they took all four, like technically all pickups, humbuckers are four wire. Single coils are typically two wires, whatever. Sometimes there'll be a third wire on there. But what they do is they take all four wires, and they put them all together, and you basically solder them in as one single pole, as they call it. And then they use the shielding of the actual pickup as the ground, okay? Which on a conventional, say, Seymour Duncan like this, you typically have four wires. So each coil has 2 and 2, and then you ground off somewhere. Sometimes there's an extra ground on the whatever. And they are the same type of pickup, but they kind of function differently. And this will give you different sounds. This is why you'll hear people say, oh, the Gibsons sound so much better than the PRSs. The PRSs sound kind of sterile. Well, they're right and they're wrong. The PRSs are wired up differently, right? Not all of them. I mean, they're same with the Gibsons, not all of them. But in general, when you get a PRS, you're going to have, or a Jackson, a Charvel, whatever, or an Ibanez, whatever it is, you're typically going to get the 4-poled wires, the modern wiring versus the vintage wiring of the single pole. So what's the difference? Well, have you ever heard people say, wow, that guitar sounds so real? And they're usually, every time you hear that, there's always going to be a Gibson in the room. Why does that guitar sound so much more real? And what they're confusing is what they're not, the guitar, both guitars sound real. They're the guitars. What they're talking about is the dynamics. When you have a single pole pickup, you get really juicy dynamics. Great for guys that play straight through the amp, whether they're playing edge of breakup, full gain, typically within reason, and definitely on the cleans. You get these really juicy bubbly, dynamic notes with like all kinds of great frequencies and overtones and everything like that. Which you'd say, okay, well, if that's what makes a pickup sound better, why doesn't everybody do it? Well, that costs you something. That's why. Whereas the 4-pole pickup doesn't give you those dynamics the same, but you get extreme clarity. Okay. And a more kind of like a stereo, think of it like a stereo sound on the pickup, where it doesn't give you like a stereo sound, but it functions like a stereo. Both will be hum canceling because they're humbuckers, and you got 2 coils there, and they'll cancel each other out for the hum. Think of it like 2 single coils in the middle position on like a Telecaster. That's basically what your humbucker's doing, right? To get rid of some of the buzz. Well, where it gets interesting is that when you're playing clean, you're always going to probably prefer the sound or edge of breakup of a single pole pickup. So if you're a guy that doesn't play with like a lot of distortion, a bit of distortion, but not a lot of distortion, you're probably really going to love that more than anything. But then once you start really pouring the gain to it, regardless of the output level, like these are what you would call medium output pickups. They call them high gain pickups, but they're like really medium output. These are high output pickups. Basically, these are about 12,000 or 14,000 to 16,000 K ohms output. These are about 8,000, 8 to 9,000. I got a 57 plus in there, so it's classic. 3 classic 57s, but 2 classic 57s and a 57 plus. These are Duncan Alpha and Omegas, if you're going to ask. But it doesn't really matter whether it's Burstbuckers, P90s, or classic 57s, or Duncan JBs, or Duncan full shred, or Alpha and Omega, or the awesome SH6 distortion, Duncan distortion. It doesn't matter. Or Ibanez Quantums. The effect is going to be the same with the 4-pole, is that when you start to really add the gain and delay and chorus and flange and all kinds of effects, you still retain the clarity. And when you get to high volumes, this is with the dynamic pickups, you get the Tony Iommi effect, and which the Tony Iommi effect is what I will say is your pickups, as volume increases, your dynamics are still there, but it gets to the point where you're so overloaded with dynamics, your pickups go microphonic on you. This was the problem with early Les Pauls and SGs forever, is that when you get a lot of high gain, and you'd be surprised how much gain you can put on a single pole pickup like that. You can get it worked for Randy Rhoads, it works for Zach Wilde, it'll work for you. I'll just leave that. But if you want a little bit more, if you want to get into like the really heavy stuff, think Periphery, deathcore or something like that, where you just got like loads of distortion, and you got a distortion pedal and a tube screamer on top of that. Well, the only thing nothing can really handle that much distortion. At some point, it's like it sounds like a waterfall, a distorted waterfall, or a can of smashed assholes. You can only put so much gain on anything, right? But this will just handle more. And then it comes to your output levels too. The thing is, the high output pickups compress better. The single dynamic pickups or single pole pickups do compress pretty good, but because when you compress them, you actually lose dBs, right? You're losing output when you compress. That's what allows you to get that really cool, punchy sound and all that. So this is where, if you're going to play with a lot of compression, you really want high output pickups. But even at that, that's only going to just affect when you're listening to it. You could, if you put the volume out halfway on that, you get the same effect as that, but you get even more clarity. So it's the clarity that really gives you clarity versus dynamics is the best way to look at it. So it doesn't mean these things don't sound good clean. They sound absolutely awesome clean. Now, that said, when you put these suckers in, split the coils on this, okay, those single coils are still wired up as a single pole. So it makes the guitar more dynamic. So what should you get and why? Well, think more tool to the job when you're buying your pickups. So anybody that's out there telling you, and yes, I've seen, Spectre Studios, how much time do I got left on this? Okay, I'm gonna round this up, but maybe I'll make a part 2.